Welcome back and to our discussion now on the big. I want to welcome Bishop Kefa Omayo, who is the presiding bishop, Redeemed Gospel Church, also a board member at Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. Thank you so much for making time for the big question. And Bishop Joseph Obanyi, representing the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops. Thank you so much for making time for the big question. We were also supposed to have in studio tonight Francis Wangusi, Director General, Communication Authority of Kenya. He has just called an hour ago. He called to say he will not be making it, sadly, but religious leaders, like we have been telling you, are protesting the publishing of regulations by the Communications Authority of Kenya and a draft of regulations by the Attorney General under the Societies Act. Let's take a look at some of those regulations that they are against. Now, the Communications Authority of Kenya programming code for free-to-air radio and television services in Kenya, which among other things directs that broadcasters, as you can see there, ensure that programs do not improperly exploit audience, for example, asking them to support them financially, abusing of a person's belief to change his or her belief, and broadcasters shall not engage in proselytism. Right, we also have the Attorney General's proposals. That should be the Attorney General's proposals there. Religious leaders must have a theological certificate. They should disclose the physical address, disclose source of funding, submit annual financial returns. Now, those are just some of the regulations. There are more that we could not obviously capture there for you. We have a lot of people protesting this, the churches, religious leaders, not churches only, it's religious leaders in general. We have evangelical and Pentecostal churches protesting this, the National Council of Churches of Kenya, the Catholic Church, and the Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims, all are against this. And we take a look at what you've been saying on Twitter before I engage my panelists here. Right, on Twitter and 2242, you keep talking to us. Let's take a look at your tweets now. We have Rollins now. The government is bringing sanity to the freedom of worship. We can't have rogue preachers behind the veil of church. Jacob Barak Wiyombo, God is the sole employer for preachers. It's God's work alone to judge them. Are you God? I'll say the government there. Digitech Solutions, no, they don't have to give their M-Pesa pay bill and numbers on air if they really are spreading the word of God. And Rock, yes, the government should not interfere with the church. The church is God's voice to a nation. And we have Mahigi Collins, they suggest a board to be made to regulate the churches, and it should have church leaders. It's important here to mention that President Kenyatta, of course, like we told you, has now weighed in on the matter, directing Attorney General to ensure the rules undergo vigorous public consultations to safeguard freedoms. Bishop Omayo, you have a problem with this. Why? Very briefly.
Yes, I would want to speak on behalf of the church, and particularly from the evangelical side. When we talk about the evangelical church, we are talking of a conglomeration of churches. Right. And I know Bishop will be talking also from the from the Catholic side. The truth is, the problem we have here is we were not consulted. And when you look at the Kenya Programming Code for free to air, Section 12 about the religious programs, like you have rightfully enumerated, there are issues that we have a problem with over here. The gospel that we preach has got three major components. Number one, proclamation. You share the word. Number two, we have persuasion. Why must somebody consider giving his life to the Lord Jesus Christ? We go to the scriptures, it's clear. Number three, you give the person the opportunity to respond because of the convictions in his spirit. The moment you interfere with that process of the proclamation, persuasion, and giving somebody an opportunity to give his life to the Lord, you have actually gagged evangelism. That's where the problem is. Okay, we've had the Attorney General talk, we had the CAK Director General talk. They both say there were a lot of consultations. Were there consultations on this before? Or how wide were the consultations?
In fact, we are wondering what kind of consultations that were done. And if any consultations were done, then why are churches and religious leaders in protest? Now, we do know that at the beginning, they were calling the churches or the religious leaders to come for a consultation, and that's where it ended. So we were waiting for the time to sit down and look at these issues, and we never saw until we have seen these rules.
So at no point did this consultation take place. That's what you're saying?
None, yes.
Right, and that is why it is important, like I said, we were to have the CAK Director General Francis Wangusi. Let's hear what he said actually yesterday when he was talking about this.
Let's say, for example, if you have a call-in program and saying, unless you pay 340,000 shillings and I pray for you, all the demons will be following you. You know, that is really not preaching. And such kind of cases have been noticed in our media space. So what we are trying to say is, in preaching, in allowing the media, the churches, even we have given them licenses to be able to preach on media platforms. We are also not giving them an express authority for those who may turn out to be unscrupulous to be able to use the same media to try and fleece people or threaten people and so on and so forth.
From what he's saying there, and with all due respect to religious leaders and what they do in this country, is there a concern there from what he's saying? Because are you saying that there could not be unscrupulous religious leaders in this country that need to be reined on?
Two potatoes that are rotten in a sack cannot actually imply that all the potatoes in that sack are rotten. The truth is, we must be able to isolate those two potatoes from the rest of the potatoes. I'm using that as an analogy to say, if 1, 2, 3 people have messed up, do we have a better way of correcting that? If the DG and his team from the Communications Authority of Kenya had consulted with us, taken us, we work with them, would have even shown them how to handle it in a very effective way.
And how is that? How would you propose that is handled? Because many people are talking about it as a problem in this country.
That's a very good question. And that's why I expected actually the Director General to be here.
Sadly,
unfortunately, and that happened again yesterday.
Okay.
It's unfortunate because of evasion. But the truth is, you see, spiritual matters cannot be regulated by a law. They can only be handled spiritually. We were going to give him recommendations on what should be done for those errant preachers. And so that from there, they can actually get to know if this preacher or that preacher goes out of the way and begins to coax or use other methods, like the threats that you had him talk about. We will come in as a church, call that preacher, if he belongs, for example, to the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, if he's a member of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, if he's a member of the Catholic Episcopal, it used to be Episcopal or Catholic Church, they will have the authority from the scriptures to discipline that pastor, correct him. Same thing we'll do from the evangelical side. So we had actual recommendations. We were armed with the recommendations that we were going to use. And that's why I was saying I wished he was here, because I remember we had a meeting with the former CS, Mr. Fred Matiang'i.
Right.
And Mr. Wangusi was there. We actually agreed in that meeting that all these publications would be put on hold. And I remember CS Fred Matiang'i telling Mr. Wangusi, please make sure these things don't go through until we have involved the church. The question is, what happened? Because we have recommendations, we are equally concerned that those rogue preachers should actually not be given a platform. But how?
Okay. What is the problem with registration, having a theological certificate? That is one thing we've seen the Catholic Church up against today.
Remember that we understand the concern of the church, of the state, that is, that there are rogue preachers and people who are defrauding the masses. But look at it, the church, at least the Catholic Church, has been here even before independence. And the church has a mechanism, it has canon law, which regulates, which has registration. People are already registered. So the Catholic Church wonders why it's coming now when already there are those churches that are organized, they are registered, they have all the rules in place. Because of some few rogue preachers who are coming, and then the whole law comes on top of us. That's what we are protesting against.
But will there be a problem with religious leaders if that law, regardless of the timing, whether it comes now or whether it was there before, for all religious leaders, why would there be a problem if they are genuine?
If you carefully look at the laws, the way the rules that have been given, you realize that we don't understand what's the motive, number one, and what they are aimed at. Because if the government is reining in on rogue preachers, then it should have directed its attention to those people and even ask us. And that's why we are saying we are not even consulted, and therefore we do not know what that is, what it's meant to do, and what is the motive behind it.
Should there be an alternative? Is there something that should be done? I mean, are you saying
yes,
that should not happen at all? Registration shouldn't happen at all?
No, we are not saying it. We understand the concern of the government. And we can see, yes, there is need to rein in on people who are defrauding Kenyans. Now, when it involves the churches, and in this case us, then we should have been consulted. Therefore, when we are not involved, we look at those laws as suspect. And sometimes we do not know what they are intended at the end of the day to do. You know, you become suspicious if you are not involved in a thing and you don't know where it's going to end. And that's why we are not happy with this.
Hussein, I would want to draw you to the Constitution, your attention to the Constitution. Article 10 of the Constitution is very clear that whenever a law is being enacted or any subsidiary provision is being enacted which is aimed at directing and governing the public, there must be public participation and there must be inclusivity. We are governed by the Constitution in this country. Why must we entertain a flawed process? That's the question. Because we are talking here of being involved in coming up with these regulations. Why was the church not involved? That's a question that we have to answer.
Right.
About rogue preachers, going back now to the other aspect of the AG's proposals. Yeah. The truth is, we have the Societies Act. Every church in this country is governed by the Societies Act. And before you register a church, there are requirements that you must actually adhere to. And at the same time, we have to submit returns and several other aspects within that Societies Act. The question is there a problem with the Societies Act? I will answer, yes, it's weak. In this sense, the government is not enforcing the laws. Now, must the church take the weakness of the government?
Okay. Like I said, it was very important to have the government side here. I'll look at a few more responses here on 22422. And if you can have more on Twitter. Jesse says, clearly the main stakeholders were not involved. No wonder the church or religious leaders are opposed to the proposed changes. And Kamau says, God is orderly. We can't have business in the name of churches. The government should tighten the conditions. That is Kamau in Ongata Rongai. Finally, because we've had the president now weighing on this matter, directing Attorney General to ensure there's a lot of consultations. The rules undergo vigorous public consultations to safeguard freedoms. What will you be doing in these consultations, very briefly as you wind up, and what will you be seeking? Let me start with you.
This is what in our statement we gave, like the government should come and we sit and talk and see how we can resolve these problems and even suggest ways on how we can rein in on those people who are spoiling the name of the church. And if they come and talk, then we can get somewhere and we can agree. We all agree something must be done. But how is what we need to come together and think together and come up with resolutions that are inclusive.
Okay.
Hussein, I must take this opportunity on behalf of the church to thank His Excellency the President for having listened and observed and given directives that these rules be shelved. But you see, we are talking about the AG's regulations. We have not talked about the programming code.
Yes.
We are keen to see whether this is going to be implemented or not. So, as we thank the President for the directives he has given, we'll also be keen as a church to see whether those who are supposed to implement and take the directives of His Excellency will actually create forums so that we can sit down, talk, and even recommend. And we are not talking about the church alone. We are talking about other religious organizations. Finally, having said this, we have this issue of the programming code. Honestly speaking, let's not gag media evangelism. We have so many criminals that have been saved in this country. We have so many people with issues that have been helped through media evangelism.
Okay.
So we cannot afford to lose that space.
Right. I'll read two SMSs now here, very conflicting. One says, the church is an independent body or house. If you hear things are not okay in your neighbor's house, you cannot make a rule and impose it in that house without asking the owner of that house. And another person here says, please Hussein, tell those evangelists that if one wants to protect the potatoes from rotting, using your analogy,
yes,
you apply chemical to the whole bag, and those that could not have rotten or are not rotten have no reason to complain unless they were also rotting in style. I don't know if it means in style or inside. I'll look at your feedback on Twitter as well. We have right, Victoria Odipo. Church leaders only protect what is good for them. They don't come out strong on matters affecting the poor. And Brian Kibulo, I have no problem with churches asking for money, but every cent should be accounted for. Those are your comments. Keep talking to us on 22422 or on Twitter using the hashtag The Big Question. Bishop Joseph Omanyi, representing the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, thank you for making time for the big question. And Bishop Kefa Omai, presiding Bishop, Redeemed Gospel Church. Thank you both, gentlemen, for making time for the big question tonight. We'll be back after this break.